Imagine waking up one morning, opening your music app, and suddenly the entire world is talking about the same two names. Not because of controversy, not because of a scandal, but because the most influential music media outlet on the planet, Billboard, just released something they haven't done in over a decade, a review, 3,000 words for one album. And right in the middle of that review, there was a sentence that made every single ARMY stop breathing for a moment. Jimin and Suga are two poles that complete each other. One is the most expressive, emotional, and vocal force in modern pop music. The other is the most technical musical architect this industry has ever produced. Two poles, one album, and one massive question that we're going to answer today. What actually happened behind Arirang, and why did Billboard write 3,000 words just for this album? Stay with me, because the answer at the end of this video will change the way you listen to BTS music forever. Hey everyone, welcome back to this channel. If you're the kind of ARMY who loves deep analysis, who wants to talk about music not just from a fandom perspective, but from a broader industry standpoint, then you are exactly where you need to be. And if this is your first time here, welcome. Go ahead and hit subscribe, because this kind of content drops every single week. Now, let's get into it, because what happened on March 29th, 2026 is not just another music review. This is history. Before we dive deeper, let's get clear on the situation first, so you truly understand why this moment is as massive as it is. March 29th, 2026. Billboard, a music media outlet that has existed since 1894, whose charts are the gold standard of the global music industry, released a review of unusual length, 3,000 words, for an album called Arirang. Now, if you're asking, why is that such a big deal? Let me explain. Billboard doesn't often write reviews that long. In their modern history, 3,000-word reviews have only been given to albums considered monumental, works that aren't just commercially successful, but carry cultural impact that far exceeds the music itself. And what makes this review even extraordinary? That article became the longest and most read article on Billboard throughout the entire month of 2026. On the very first day it was published, the article went viral across every platform: Twitter, Reddit, TikTok, even LinkedIn. Not just within the ARMY community, but among music journalists, critics, and even other musicians who were curious about what Billboard saw in this album. And in the middle of all that noise, two names kept appearing over and over again: Jimin and Suga. Billboard's review of Arirang wasn't written in the style of ordinary journalism. It was written like an academic essay, full of cross-references, deep analysis, and observations that felt like they were written by someone who had listened to the album hundreds of times. And out of those 3,000 words, the largest portion was dedicated to discussing two BTS members, Jimin and Suga. Billboard described them as two poles that complete each other. A simple phrase, but if you really sit with it and think about it, that phrase carries enormous weight. Because two poles doesn't mean they're opposites in a negative sense. In physics, two opposing magnetic poles are actually the strongest. They pull toward each other the hardest. They need each other the most. And when they come together, they create an energy field that cannot be broken. And that is exactly what Billboard saw in Arirang. Let's talk about Jimin first. Billboard described Jimin as the most expressive, emotional, and vocal force in the context of modern pop music. Not just BTS, not just K-pop, modern pop music as a whole. That is an incredibly bold statement from Billboard, and they didn't say it without reason. If you look at Jimin's journey from BTS's debut in 2013 up to today, there is one thread that has never been cut: the courage to be emotionally honest.
At a time when many pop singers choose the safe sound, the commercial sound, the sound that's easy to receive, Jimin has always chosen the opposite. He chooses the vulnerable sound, the one that feels like it's being torn from inside his chest, the kind that makes you feel that the person singing it is genuinely living every single word that comes out. And in Arirang, that quality reaches its absolute peak. Billboard wrote that in this album, Jimin achieved something very rarely accomplished by any pop singer. He made sadness feel beautiful without making it feel overdramatic. That is an extraordinarily rare ability, and Billboard acknowledged it loudly. Beyond that, the review also highlighted how Jimin uses vocal dynamics as a storytelling tool. The way he moves from a whisper that's barely audible to a falsetto that splits the sky open, not as a technical showpiece, but as an emotional narrative that continues to develop from one song to the next. Billboard called it vocal storytelling at its finest. Storytelling through voice, at the highest level it can possibly be achieved. Now let's turn to Suga. And this is where Billboard's review becomes truly extraordinary. If Jimin is about feeling, about emotion flowing freely, then Suga is about structure, about design, about how every element in a song is placed with precision that is almost mathematical. Billboard called Suga the most technical musical architect and sonic designer this industry has ever produced. And the word architect was not chosen by accident. An architect doesn't just build something, an architect designs something. They think through every detail from the foundation that cannot be seen to the smallest ornament on the surface. They make sure that what they build is not only beautiful to look at, but strong enough to stand for years to come. And that is what Suga does with music. Beneath every track on Arirang, Billboard found layers of production that you wouldn't notice on the first listen, maybe not even on the fifth. But when Billboard's critics sat down and truly analyzed the recordings with the best headphones in a quiet room, they discovered details that made them stop and say, "This was not an accident. This was designed." A note that emerges at the 47-second mark of one song that harmonically mirrors a melody introduced in the album's opening track. A drum texture that shifts subtly in the bridge, reflecting the emotional shift in the lyrics. A vocal effect used not as an aesthetic gimmick, but as a narrative symbol. Suga builds entire worlds inside every song, and Billboard saw all of it. But wait, because the most surprising part of this review hasn't been discussed yet. And this is the part that almost no one is talking about, even among the ARMY who have already read the full review. Billboard didn't just praise Jimin and Suga separately. They discussed how the two of them work together, and what happens when the emotional pole and the technical pole meet in one single project. They called it a musical symbiosis that rarely occurs even in the most seasoned musical partnerships in the world. And this is the part that made me genuinely stop when I read it. Because Billboard wasn't talking about two people who happened to be in the same group and happened to work on the same album. They were talking about two artists who, consciously or not, have built their own musical language, a language that only the two of them can speak perfectly together, and that when performed for the world, feels like something brand new, yet deeply, achingly familiar.
And that brings us to the bigger question. When did this start? Because if you look back at the journey of Jimin and Suga within BTS, a journey that has spanned more than a decade, you'll find a pattern that is absolutely fascinating. They both come from the same city, Daegu, a small detail that's often brought up in the context of humor or personal closeness, but rarely analyzed in a musical context. Yet there is something uniquely powerful about musicians who grew up in the same environment. There are the same cultural references, the same rhythms of life, the same aesthetic sensibility formed from shared experiences, even if the ways of expressing it turn out to be wildly different. Jimin chose dance, movement, the body as a medium of expression,
Suga chose production, composition, the mind as the medium of creation. Two completely different paths, but the same roots. And when the two of them came together in BTS, in the intense creative process that stretched across years, across world tours, across recording sessions that ran until dawn, something began to take shape. A creative trust that is extremely rare, even among the greatest musicians in the world. Try paying attention to old Suga interviews. When asked about which BTS member understands his musical vision the most, his answers are almost always surprising, not because he explicitly names one person, but because of the way he describes the listening process inside BTS. There is a consistent undercurrent about how Jimin's reaction to his song demos always felt different, deeper, more instinctive, as if Jimin wasn't just hearing the song, but hearing the intention behind it. And from Jimin's side, if you pay attention to how he talks about the recording process across various interviews over the years, one thing repeats itself: trust. Trust that when he gives his voice to a song built with a certain technical depth, he doesn't have to be afraid of getting lost, because the structure has already been built to support every emotion he pours into it. A strong foundation for emotions that need to run free. An architect and a poet sharing the same building. Billboard saw this, and they wrote 3,000 words about it. And now we arrive at the most important part, the most emotional, the most profound. There is one paragraph in Billboard's review that, and I promise you this, will make you read it more than once. Billboard wrote that Arirang is not just a music album. In a broader context, in the context of a global music industry increasingly dominated by algorithms, by commercial formulas, by decisions made based on streaming data rather than artistic vision, Arirang is a statement of resistance. An album made not for the charts, not for the numbers, but for something far greater than all of that. And Billboard, a media outlet that lives by the charts, whose reputation was built on commercial numbers, acknowledged that fact in a way that was profoundly honest and remarkably brave. They wrote that when an album can make experienced music critics forget to check its streaming numbers, forget to question its chart position, and simply sit in silence and listen from the first track to the very last, that is a sign that the album has done something extraordinary. And that is what Arirang did to the Billboard critics team. They listened, in silence, from beginning to end, 3 times in a row before they even began to write a single word. And when they finally started writing, they couldn't stop. 3,000 words later, they concluded with a sentence that has been circulating throughout the ARMY community ever since the article was first published. Jimin and Suga are not merely 2 poles of a music group. They are proof that in music, as in the universe, the most opposing poles are the ones that create the strongest gravitational field, pulling everyone into their orbit and never letting them go. They are gravity, and we have all been caught in their orbit for a long time now, without ever truly realizing it, until Billboard said out loud what our hearts had already felt for years. This is not about numbers. This is not about charts. This is not about who is more popular or who is more talented. This is about how 2 human beings, in vastly different ways, with vastly different strengths, can create something together that far exceeds what either of them could accomplish alone. Jimin brings the soul. Suga builds the home. And inside that home, the soul is free to fly. That is Arirang. That is what Billboard saw. That is what the world has only just begun to understand. So, after all of this, after Billboard's 3,000 words, after this deep analysis of 2 poles of power that have been right in front of our eyes all along, I want to leave you with one question. Not a question about charts, not about awards, not about who's the best, but this one. Have you truly listened to Arirang? Not as background music, not while scrolling, not while doing something else, but truly listened the way Billboard's team of critics did, sitting still, headphones on, eyes closed, and letting the album speak to you. because maybe, just maybe, you'll find the same thing they found, that there is something in this music that feels like home, that feels like someone understands you even before you know how to put it into words yourself. And if you've listened to Ari Wrong that way, or if you're planning to do it after this video ends, I want to know which track hit you the deepest. Write it in the comments. I read all of them, and I'll reply to as many as I can. If this video made you see Jimin and Suga even a little differently today, with a little more depth, with a little more appreciation, please like this video. Not for the algorithm, but as a sign that content like this is worth continuing to create. And if you want to keep receiving deep analysis like this, about BTS, about ARMY, about music that genuinely means something, subscribe now, turn on notifications, and let's keep making this journey together. Until the next video, take care of yourself, take care of the music you love, and as always, keep listening with your heart.